Voices Untold.
11 days after I poured hair removal cream into my own shampoo bottle, one of the most photographed women in America walked a red carpet in Los Angeles with a shaved head, dodging every question about what had happened to her hair. I was sitting on my sofa in Austin with a laptop on my knees when I saw it. Camera flashes, a silk scarf she kept adjusting because it wouldn't stay put, a gleaming, pale scalp under the spotlights, reporters shouting over each other about a mysterious incident, a scandal behind the scenes, an illness nobody would confirm. Nobody in that country knew why Vivian Marsh had shaved her head. Two of us did. She knew what had happened to her, in a shower she had no business standing in. And I knew why, because it had come out of a bottle I'd marked with my own fingernail. It started with a single blonde hair. My name is Thea Bellamy, and 16 years earlier I had married Julian in a church in my hometown, with all our relatives crowded into 6 pews, thinking, this is what happiness feels like, and it will last forever. The forever part held up, on paper. That Saturday morning I woke before him. The sun cast bright stripes on the bedroom wall, and I lay still, listening to him breathe, wondering if he ever lay awake thinking about us. I got up, made coffee, scrolled my phone. A text from Colette. Hey, how's your movie star doing? Phone in hand again? Come to the farmer's market. You need a distraction. She'd always called him a movie star, even though he wasn't one. Julian was a production manager, always on location. Long nights, receptions, 16 years of stories from sets I'd never visited while I stayed home in Austin with my layouts and my clients. Colette had hinted for years that she didn't trust him. Too many pretty colleagues, too many nights away. I'd always brushed it off. Morning. Julian came in groggy, in shorts, and grabbed his phone first thing. Everything okay? He asked, eyes on the screen. Everything's fine. I watched him over the rim of my cup. Just have to check some emails. New York was exhausting. Everything piles up. Of course, I said. He caught my tone and looked up. What? Nothing. I'm going to clean the bathroom. Cleaning again? He laughed. Saturday morning and you want to scrub tile. Someone has to. Let's have breakfast instead. In a minute. I started cleaning mechanically the way I always did, and then I saw it. A blonde hair in our shower. Thin, light, almost translucent when I held it up. Not mine, not his. Everything I had only vaguely felt before. Mistrust, uncertainty, distance became real in the space of 1 second. A piece of evidence, small and inconspicuous and sharp as a knife. I have dark hair. Julian has dark hair. We live alone. I felt hot under my rubber gloves. I looked at it one more time, and then I threw it in the trash. Quickly, as if I could throw the thought away with it. Thea? His voice from the kitchen. Everything okay? Yes. Too quick. Too high. A few seconds later, he was in the doorway with his coffee, hair messy. You seem off. I'm fine, just doing a quick clean. You're pale. It's okay. I'll be done in a minute. And I wiped the shower wall, right where the hair had been stuck. At breakfast, he scrambled eggs and talked about walking in Zilker Park. Just the two of us. I said it sounded great and thought, just the two of us, and or has someone else been here? I reached for the salt and put it down again because my hands were trembling. You seem tense. Is something wrong? Now or never, I thought. But how do you say it? I found a blonde hair in our shower. Can you explain that? Instead, I said, did you shower last night after I went to bed? He blinked. Yeah, why? No reason. The bathroom was so humid this morning. Huh, yeah, it was late. I was sweaty from the drive back from the airport. I nodded and pushed my eggs around. How was New York? Stressful. Long days, chaotic crew, but the premiere was well attended. Run into anyone you knew? He laughed quietly. Why are you asking like that? Just curious. Sure, you always run into people. The business is small. He set his fork down and looked at me. Thea, if something's on your mind, say it. 16 years. I can tell when something's bothering you. I forced a smile. I'm fine. Really. Can I thought. Can I say anything to you? After that, I started looking more closely. On the surface, nothing changed. He worked, made calls, left for appointments. We ate dinner and made small talk. But every gesture had a second meaning now. His phone, which had always lain face up on the table, now lay face down. He stayed in the bathroom longer in the evenings, the water running, the fan humming, sometimes humming along with it. I'd never cared before. Now I wondered who he was showering for so wholeheartedly when I was already in my pajamas. He shaved more often, even on office days. All small things. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. I lay awake at night beside him while he slept deeply and wondered whether I was going crazy or whether I'd been looking away for years. 2 days later, I texted Colette. We met at a cafe on South Congress, crowded, tourists in line, the smell of pastries. "You look tense," she said. "Too much work." "Work?" She raised an eyebrow. "Or too much Julian?" I stirred the foam in my cup. "It's nothing concrete, just little things. You know when you suddenly notice things you never paid attention to before. A different soap, coming home late, a phone lying face down." I heard how thin it sounded. "Maybe I'm seeing ghosts." Colette set her cup down slowly. "Ghosts are usually not ghosts," she said. "Sometimes it's just what's been in the room the whole time." I looked up. "You mean—" She shrugged. "I'm just saying you should look closer." I walked home through the shaded side streets with her words going around in me. You can tell when someone is different. And I did start to register everything. The soap we'd never bought, the absent little smile at his phone, the care he took choosing clothes for a day at a desk. I said nothing. I just collected. An invisible log building in my head. It was my shampoo that broke it open. I've used the same one for years, a thick, dark liquid with a herbal smell that always gave me a strange sense of stability. Julian didn't like the smell. He had his own body wash, always the same one, and we'd had that division for years. My shelf, his shelf. 2 small territories nobody questioned. One evening in the shower, I noticed the bottle was lighter. I shook it. It was at least a third emptier than it should have been, and I'd just bought it. At first I thought I'd been careless, wasteful, that I'd misremembered. So over the next few days, I paid attention. I put it back in exactly the same spot every time, and I marked a line in the plastic with my fingernail. 3 days later, it was clear. The shampoo was emptying without my help. Julian hated that smell. He had never touched it, never even tried it, so it wasn't him. I stood in the bathroom one morning with the bottle in my hand, the light from the fixture sliding on the plastic, my heart going in my temples. She had been here, in this house. Whoever she was, she had stood in my shower and washed her hair. On some afternoon when I was at a client meeting, or out with Colette, or anywhere else in the city being useful, she had used my shampoo, and she had left before I got home, and Julian had put everything back exactly where it belonged. It wasn't a loose hair anymore, something that could still be explained away. This was intimate. Someone had taken my place, touched my things, walked out of my house wearing my scent. I felt displaced in my own home. That evening, I saw Colette again. She called. I said yes, because I couldn't carry it alone anymore. A small bar on Rainy Street, candles, low voices. I told her about the shampoo almost shamefully, as if it were a ridiculous thing to be upset about. She listened with her arms crossed. So, either he's using it secretly or someone else used it. He can't stand the smell. He's never touched it. Never. She took a sip of wine and set the glass down. Then you know what that means. I said nothing. There was a storm in me and no words for it. "Thea," she said softer, "you're not looking for signs anymore. You've already found them." Later, in the dark, I lay next to my sleeping husband and felt more alone than I ever had in my life. The hair, the shampoo, the late nights. It was a pattern now, and a decision was forming in me, quiet and dark. If I couldn't have the truth the easy way, I'd take it myself. I turned it over for days. I could confront him, ask him straight out. But what if he brushed it off? What if he made me the paranoid one? Then I'd be alone with my uncertainty and no proof at all. I needed something he couldn't deny. The idea came almost as a joke. What if someone else is using my shampoo, and I make sure it can't go unnoticed? I laughed at myself when I thought it, and then I stopped laughing because it wouldn't leave. The next morning I went to the drugstore on Congress Avenue. An ordinary gray weekday, full shelves, women with baskets, a man standing perplexed in front of the razors. I pushed my cart along and picked up cleaning supplies, toothpaste, cotton pads. And then I stopped in front of the hair removal creams. I stood there and felt myself go hot. I looked around as though my guilt were written on my face. Nobody was paying the slightest attention to me. A woman was reading the back of a bottle of shampoo for dry hair. I took a tube and buried it between the laundry detergent and the paper towels, and my heart was going like I'd stolen something. At home, I waited until Julian shut himself in his office. Then I went into the bathroom, closed the door, and set the shampoo bottle on the sink. The cream smelled sharp and chemical, nothing like the herbal smell I'd used for years. I poured it in slowly, carefully, so that nothing spilled. I shook the bottle until the consistency looked right. Then I put it back in its place, exactly where it lived, and washed my hands and wiped the sink as though a trace of me on my own sink would give me away. My heart was so loud I was sure he could hear it through the wall. When I was done, I leaned against the cold tile and breathed. At dinner, I watched him eat and talk about the new shoot. I nodded. I asked questions. I laughed in the right places. Nobody would have guessed that I had just become a different woman. Not the understanding wife anymore, but something with its own plans. Inside, a storm. What if I've gone too far? What if it's true, and she comes back? What if I get a certainty I can't get rid of? I lay awake that night while he slept. I had set a trap, and now I was standing next to it in the dark, waiting to hear it close. For 2 days, nothing. I checked the bottle compulsively, lifting it, turning it, shaking it. The level looked the same. Maybe nobody had used it. Maybe it was over. But my heart went faster every time Julian went to shower. I'd stand in the kitchen listening to the water, imagining him unscrewing the cap. And then I'd remember he hated the smell. So I waited. Not for him. For her. Those days went by like a shadow play. I clicked through emails, edited layouts, answered clients, and none of it touched me. In the evenings, we sat on the sofa and watched something, and he made popcorn and put his arm around me, and I thought, maybe it really is my imagination. Maybe she doesn't exist. Maybe I'm the one losing herself. Then he'd go into his office, and I'd go into the bathroom and lift the bottle again. On the 4th day it happened. Afternoon. Julian was supposedly at the office. I walked into the bathroom almost casually and stopped. The bottle was lighter. I picked it up and felt the difference before I even looked. My fingernail mark confirmed it, at least 2 finger widths gone. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub with it in my hands. The air was close and I felt dizzy. She had been here, in my bathroom, under my water, with my shampoo, and whatever had happened to her in that shower had already happened, hours ago, while I was out being useful somewhere in the city. I barely slept. I lay listening to every sound in the house while Julian breathed calmly beside me, and I imagined a woman I'd never seen stepping out of a shower with handfuls of her own hair in her hands. It frightened me how clearly I could see it. What have I done? Have I gone too far? And underneath the fear, something else, something steadier. For the first time in months, I had control. It was a Thursday evening. I had the TV on in the background while I worked, and Julian was out again. A long production meeting, he'd said. The news was on, and I was barely listening until a name made me look up. Vivian Marsh, actress, blonde. One of those faces everyone in America knows. She was on the screen in front of a premier theater in Los Angeles, camera flashes going off around her, and her head was bald, smoothly shaven. No hair, no hint of hair, just a pale scalp gleaming under the lights. She looked flustered. She kept adjusting a scarf that wouldn't stay put, and she dodged every question they shouted at her. My fingers stopped on the keyboard. The shampoo, I couldn't look away, and in that moment I knew, with no doubt and no escape from it, she was the one. She had been in my bathroom. She had used my shampoo. The days after that were a blur of headlines. Vivienne Marsh with a bald head. Coincidence or scandal? What's behind the actress's sudden hair loss? Photos everywhere. Vivienne in a wig. Vivienne in a headscarf. Vivienne with a hand up against the cameras. I read all of it and felt a mix of triumph and disgust and fear. The gossip pages filled in the rest over that week, the way gossip pages do, that there had been 10 days of hats and extensions, and a stylist flown in from New York, that when none of it held, she'd shaved what was left the night before the premiere and walked the carpet anyway. I have thought about those 10 days more than I have ever admitted to anyone, and there was one line, buried in a longer piece, that I read 4 times standing at my own kitchen counter. Sources close to the actress say a dermatologist has ruled out illness. The cause is believed to be a topical chemical exposure. Ms. Marsh has declined to say where or when it occurred. Declined to say where. Of course she had. Because there was only one answer to that question, and it began with a house in Austin she had no business being in, and a man whose wife was standing in the kitchen of it. Whatever she knew, and I think she knew everything within about a week, she was never going to be able to say it out loud without saying the rest of it too. She could have the truth or her reputation. She could not have both. So she said nothing, and the not saying held her down for far longer than the hair ever did. For about a month I waited anyway. Every time the phone rang with a number I didn't know, every time a car slowed on our street, some animal part of me stood up and got ready. Nobody ever came, and after a while I understood that nobody was going to, that she had made the same calculation I had from the other side of it, and we were both going to live inside our silences and pretend they were choices. And Julian said nothing. He came home late and flustered. His answers got shorter. He talked quickly about work, filling every silence with words, and avoided my eyes. One night at dinner, he stopped with his cutlery on the plate and looked at me for a long moment. "Thea," he began, and then stopped. "What?" I said, calmly, almost coldly. "Nothing," he mumbled and lowered his head. But I knew. He suspected that I knew. Within days, she was everywhere. Sabotage on set. Insiders speak of intrigues. Star with a twist of fate. What's really behind it? Doctors on morning shows talked about autoimmune conditions. Stylists praised her bravery. Talk shows debated it. Not one of them was going to get there. The only 2 people who could end the speculation in a sentence were the woman on the screen and the woman on the sofa, and neither of us was going to open her mouth. I sat on the sofa in the evenings with the remote in my hand while Julian watched the news from the armchair across from me, his jaw tight. Every time her face came up, something flickered across his. "Crazy, isn't it?" I said lightly. "All her hair gone so suddenly." He cleared his throat and reached for his glass. "Yeah, terrible." "Do you think she—" I left it hanging and looked at him. "I have no idea," he said. "I barely know her." Barely. After my bathroom, my shower, my shampoo, I nodded and smiled thinly. Of course. At the coffee shop the next day, 2 women in front of me were whispering about her. Such a pretty woman. That must be cancer, poor thing. The truth burned on my tongue and I let it sit there, and the satisfaction started to crumble, because as much as it satisfied me to see that woman exposed, it also choked me. I kept imagining her face in the moment she understood what was happening, the panic, the shame, the handfuls of hair. Part of me said she deserved it. Another part said, you went too far. At home, there was silence. Julian stayed in his office longer, made calls behind a closed door, and talked to me about nothing at all, weaving a net of trivialities for me to get tangled in. I let him, because the truth was already standing in the house with us, like a third person, poisoning everything. On Sunday, she was on the front page again, this time in The Statesman. Not a tabloid. Hollywood star loses hair. Film industry speculates about set scandal. I laid it in the middle of the kitchen table and waited. Julian came in, poured his coffee, and saw it. A twitch went across his face, and he gripped the cup as if it had suddenly become essential to his survival. "Don't you know her too?" I asked, in the most innocent voice I have. He looked at the photo, then at me. For a second, his face was a mask. "From the set," he said. She's complicated." "I see." "Say something," I thought. "Admit it, or lie properly, but do something." He said nothing. He took his coffee into his office and closed the door. And in that silence, I decided, if he wouldn't speak, I would. That Tuesday evening, he was in his armchair with a glass of red wine, a script open on the coffee table. His fingers turned the pages, but his eyes were empty. I stood in the doorway and heard my own heartbeat. "We need to talk." He looked up, almost annoyed. "Thea, please, not now. I'm tired." "No." My voice shook, and I let it shake. "Right now." He set the script aside. "What's wrong?" I sat down across from him and clenched my hands into fists so he wouldn't see them tremble. "For weeks, something's been wrong. You're different, distant, secretive." I took a breath. "And then I found blonde hair in our shower, hair that isn't ours." He blinked. His face froze, just a small muscle going in his jaw. "Thea," he said softly, "the way you'd talk to someone standing on a ledge, it's not what you think." I laughed, dry. "Not what I think? I'm not blind, Julian. I watch my shampoo get emptier and emptier. I know someone else was here, in my bathroom, in my shower." I pushed the newspaper across the table at him. "Vivian in her headscarf. Star loses hair. Sabotage or illness?" He stared at the photo, then at the word shampoo, somewhere in the air between us, and I watched it arrive. The whole shape of it, all at once, 11 days late. "Thea." His voice had gone strange. "What did you put in it?" I didn't answer. I let the question sit there on the table with the newspaper, and I looked at him until he understood that he was in no position on this earth to ask me a single thing. "Say it," I said, and my voice came out cutting clear. "Say it to my face. Be honest, just once." He lowered his head and ran both hands over his face. For a moment, there was only his breathing. Then he looked up, and there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Fear. "It happened," he whispered. "It happened. So simple, so easily said, like a slip on wet tile." "How long?" He said nothing. "How long?" I brought my fist down on the table and the glass rattled. He looked at me almost pleadingly, then dropped his eyes. "A few months." "A few months." I laughed and it came out bitter. "A few months where she stood in my bathroom, used my shampoo, washed her hair in my shower in the middle of the afternoon, and was gone before I got home." The tears came, but I held his eyes. "And you put everything back where it belonged and said nothing. You looked at me like everything was fine, day after day." He stood up to come to me, and I pulled back. "Thea, please, it was a mistake. I didn't want this. I love you." "Love?" My voice cracked. "You dare use that word? Love is trust. Love means not feeling like a stranger in my own home." He reached for my hand, and I tore it away. 16 years, Julian. I gave you my youth, my dreams, and you replaced me with an actress because she's blonde and glamorous." "It wasn't planned," he said, his eyes glistening. "It just happened." Just happened. The tears were running now, and I didn't wipe them. It just happened that you lied to me. It just happened that you turned our marriage into a play. What followed lasted hours. I screamed, and he sat silent. Then he screamed, and I sat silent. We said things neither of us could take back. "You're a stranger to me. I despise you. 16 years for nothing." And in between, moments when we both cried and looked at each other and recognized something that used to be there. But it was an echo, and an echo isn't enough to hold a marriage up. The next day, I went to a law firm downtown. Gray carpet, white walls, files on the shelves. The lawyer listened to the whole thing without once looking surprised. "We'll file for divorce," she said. "And if you want, we can have the press on your side." I wiped my eyes. Yes, I want that. On the bus home, I cried quietly, the way you can in a crowd and nobody noticed, which felt right somehow. Nobody had noticed any of it, except me. But underneath the crying, there was something new. Clarity. It was over. 2 days later, I met Elliot Reyes at a cafe on South Congress. He was taller than I'd imagined, in a dark coat, and his handshake was firm and warm. "I've been writing about celebrities and scandals for 15 years, he said, notepad closed in front of him. "But I don't want to exploit your story. I want it told in your words." Something in me let go, and I started talking. That Saturday morning, the hair in the shower and how I'd wanted to bury it, the nights lying awake next to Julian, not knowing whether I was paranoid or finally waking up, the shampoo emptying, the mark on the bottle. I did not tell him about the tube of cream between the laundry detergent and the paper towels. I have never told anyone that, and I never will. And if you're waiting for me to be sorry about the part I left out, you'll be waiting a while. And then, I said, and my voice went, I was sitting in front of the TV, and there she was, and all of America was talking about it, and I knew she had stood in my shower. He handed me a napkin. No pity on his face, just quiet presence. "You need to know," he said after a while, "if we publish this, there's no going back. There will be attacks, mockery, doubt, but also respect. Are you ready?" "Yes," I said. "I've been silent for too long." The morning it ran, I pulled the paper out of the mailbox and felt like I was holding a bomb. The wife of a Hollywood producer breaks her silence. The affair behind the industry's strangest month. And below it, in black and white, Thea Bellamy, wife of production manager Julian Bellamy, speaks out. My hands shook as I turned the pages. There it was. My story. My words. I've been silent for too long. You can't end 16 years of marriage with a lie. Triumph and shame arrived at exactly the same time. The truth was no longer my dark secret, and the whole city could read it over breakfast. When I walked into the coffee shop that morning, I felt people look at me a beat too long. The barista's eyes moved over my face. 2 men whispered as I passed. I pulled my scarf tighter and wished I were invisible, and then thought, no, that's exactly what I don't want anymore. Elliot called that evening. The article's out. It's being widely discussed. A pause. Many readers are writing in to say they see themselves in your story, that they want to be brave enough to stop being silent. I held the phone to my ear and couldn't speak for a second. I write about scandals that are empty, he said. Yours means something. The divorce came through in the spring. A matter-of-fact letter from the court, a stack of paper that ended 16 years. I cried, but it wasn't a collapse. It was a letting go. Julian disappeared from my life like a shadow. Sometimes I still saw his name attached to a film, a premiere, that whole world that had once connected us. I don't know whether he's still seeing Vivian, and the strangest gift of that year was discovering I truly didn't care. She retreated from public life, they said. When I see her picture now, I feel nothing. No triumph, no anger. Just a shrug and something quieter underneath it that I've decided not to examine too closely. I've seen Elliot a few times since. Walks in Zilker Park, coffee in small cafes, a movie where neither of us watched the screen. Nothing named, nothing rushed. And for the first time in years, I'm not living inside a plan. One evening this spring, I sat out on my balcony with a glass of wine and watched the sun go down over the rooftops, turning the whole sky pink and gold. I thought about the 19-year-old who said yes with so much hope. About the nights I doubted my own mind. About the morning I stood in a bathroom with a bottle in my hand and decided I was done being quiet. And I said it out loud to nobody. It wasn't for nothing. Not a single day.